humanity is struggling to evolve. The laboratory of Earth is a challenging school. Outside of Earth's frequency, there are other highly evolved guiding forces. A lot of people will say that the spiritual realm exists outside of time and space. In regard to soul evolution, that is honestly not valid. Our incarnations are happening in real time because that's how our soul evolves lifetime to lifetime. Only rather experienced souls can manage energetically 2 incarnations at once. That's what we call split incarnation. The soul of Gandhi is the same soul as Nelson Mandela. Those are earth-based souls. In early civilization, 6,000 years ago, there was the ability for a soul to materialize in an adult body. That has not happened energetically in thousands of years. There are places on the planet that are energetic portals where the veil is thinner. I don't want to become overly political or complicated with this, but when Earth was ready for civilization, 4 interplanetary souls were selected to become Source. And they all had different skills, different knowledge, different experiences, but highly evolved souls. So there are 4 souls that make up Source. They work, of course, as a team, serving different purposes. And so that is what I understand is the Manu or Source. And this is the guiding force of Earth. Outside of Earth's frequency, there are other highly evolved guiding forces that intends to guide humanity to greater levels, to use the term that fits your podcast, higher levels of evolution of humanity.
Cool, because I think one of the things that you've got the capability of helping us with today is helping us actually understand how the Earth's spiritual realm is coordinated. Can you bring us into your understanding of that, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we humans might call heaven, this is where it's always a little bit complicated to say, okay, this group of people uses this term and that, so I want to kind of bring those terms together. What we think of as the spiritual realm or heaven is that, another way to put it would be 5th dimension and higher, where guides, advanced souls, what some people call ascended masters, where guides reside. And, guides don't come down here to Earth and say, okay, I'm going to fix this political problem between these 2 countries. Fixing political problems is what humans are responsible for. But guides influence. And so the spiritual realm of Earth, yes, is ultimately guided by what I just spoke about, Source or the Manu. But there are many highly evolved souls that serve as guides. And some of those souls continue to incarnate on Earth. Some of those souls no longer incarnate on Earth. So if it's a soul that has 1 or more than 1 human incarnations, then we would call it the higher self of that soul that functions almost like a Congress, a parliament, again, whatever word fits. There are a number of souls that are highly evolved, that are guided by Source, that work in a parliament of Source, or often it's called a council. And the council of these higher guides work to try to decide what would be the best way to guide Earth. Here's this problem going on in Africa, in the country of Sudan. How can we guide humans to take steps to solve these problems? And so all these, it's my understanding, these guides don't always agree. But they're not like humans. They don't criticize each other. They don't, get into screaming arguments with each other about. They are respectful, but they may have difference of opinion.
Interesting. And so you mentioned earlier that there's 4 interplanetary souls that make up Source or Manu. Can you describe why you call it Manu? What's Manu?
That's an Eastern term. People could look it up. It's a Sanskrit term. It's just another word for God, Great Spirit, the divine. It's a Sanskrit term. And I think probably the reason that certain guides, including my own guides, use it is it removes it from a religious context and puts it into a highly evolved guiding force. And then it makes it, I think, for some, a bit easier to not put it into a dogmatic, punishment oriented religious context.
Awesome. One of the key pieces in there then is you mentioned 4 interplanetary souls, which I think you said haven't incarnated to Earth, but that's not always the case. So can you bring us into the different types of souls that there are, and the hallmarks of each of them? I mean, yeah, anyway, yeah, won't answer
Yes,
your question for you. Yeah.
yes. So when I started guiding soul level regression, I don't know, I lose track, 28 years ago or whatever it was. In the beginning, when I started guiding regression, and for anyone who understands regression, it means I guide the client to gain their own understanding of past lives and who they are as a soul. So initially, my clients were souls that are designed and created to primarily incarnate on Earth. And that's what I call earth-based souls. And the reason I say that so distinctly is sometimes people think I'm saying earthbound. And earthbound's a different spiritual term. A lot of people use the term earthbound to mean a soul where the person's passed on, but the soul is stuck. That's not what I'm referring to. So an earth-based soul, those were the types of clients I began to work with early on in my regression career. And so most of my clients were souls created to grow and evolve on Earth. So an Earth-based soul, or what I call an EB, an Earth-based soul is a soul that prior to incarnation on Earth, they're sort of like, if we think about school, they're sort of like preschoolers. They're pre-first graders. In other words, um, they are young, unevolved souls, and the way they progress, or the way, if we're an earth-based soul, the way we progress is to come into the body. As probably most listeners know, the laboratory of Earth is a challenging laboratory. It's a challenging school. And so an earth-based soul incarnates over and over and over and over on Earth to grow and evolve, learning, growing, tripping and falling, um, using free will as we have on Earth. We all sometimes make free will choices when we're in the body that aren't the best choices. So, what do we call that? We call that karma. Um, and then in subsequent lifetimes, we come back into body to balance those choices that might not have been the most useful. An earth-based soul also gathers what we call dharma. And, people are probably noticing, oh, more of these Eastern terms. Dharma means, what did I accomplish in a past life? What did I learn? And once we accomplish something like, um, being a committed parent, for example, or being in a balanced romantic relationship, um, once we gain that knowledge, those skills, which we call dharma, we don't lose it. We don't regress backwards. So an earth-based soul grows and evolves lifetime to lifetime, on and on, in body on Earth. That's an earth-based soul. I actually happen to be an earth-based soul, in case people are wondering about that.
Are the
So
majority of us Earth-based souls, or yeah, is there a proportion in your mind?
yes, good question. Yes, most humans. So here's what I've learned from clients. About 90%, maybe more like 95%, um, of all humans are earth-based souls that are moderately evolved, that are not highly, highly evolved souls. Then there's about 5 or 6% of humans that are highly evolved, and that's part of the process of we as humans making choices about how does humanity need to shift? What are some of the pitfalls of humanity that we need to be working on? So yes, most people are earth-based souls, but there are two other types of souls that in some cases choose to incarnate. I know this from guiding clients in regression. So, one of those other types of souls I call an interplanetary soul, which is the term we talked about with the Manu. Um, so there are souls that come from other locations outside of the Earth's spiritual realm, outside of, we might say, from the broader celestial realm, that agree to come to Earth. And the reason, when I work with what I call IP soul clients, interplanetary soul clients, the reason IPs come to Earth is because they come from healthy cultures outside of Earth's energy, and they bring those more advanced ways, more evolved means of functioning to Earth to teach us, to demonstrate more effective human behavior. So many of my clients, probably, I mean, now currently 50% of my clients are interplanetary souls. Very interesting people, very advanced in different ways. Some are advanced in technology, some are advanced in music, in art, in human interaction, effective elementary school teachers. And so interplanetary souls come to Earth, and often they're challenged. They're often challenged because they're not used to humanity and they're not used to functioning in the human body. So, interplanetary souls sometimes have digestive issues, allergy issues, autoimmune disorders, learning challenges, simply because there's nothing wrong with them, but because they're not accustomed to being on Earth. So, and functioning in these types of bodies that we humans have. So that's an interplanetary
I'm
soul.
sure there's some social complications as well, like, probably that they interface with just listening to what you're sharing.
Totally. They're at times diagnosed on the autistic spectrum. And so I think sometimes we misjudge what causes things like autism. And it's my experience with clients, with interplanetary soul clients, that uh, someone who's diagnosed with autistic symptoms may simply come from a culture where the means of communication or the means of interrelating isn't the way we humans function. And that's the only reason that that person, that child, that adult seems challenged to, for example, to communicate.
And sorry, I interrupted you, said
No, no,
yeah.
no, that's fine. So we can always take any of this farther and I can explain more. The third type of soul is a soul from the angelic realm. So, angelic realm souls do come to Earth. Angelic realm souls directly serve Source. They carry the energy, the orientation, the frequency of Source. So, if sometimes words are inadequate, but if we have to put language to that, we're talking about love, compassion, equality, um, inclusivity versus exclusivity. So, an angelic realm soul is a part of the community of souls that serve Source and help guide us toward um, more respectful ways of behaving, more, yeah, mutual respect. And again, the words I often use easily would be love and compassion. So those souls, they're certainly not. It's interesting. Sometimes people will say to me, "Well, okay, Linda, so I had a regression, and I learned in the regression I'm a soul from the angelic realm, but." But Linda, I'm not always loving and caring. I'm not always as accepting as I think I need to be. And that's because when we come into the body, no matter what our soul energy is or where our soul comes from, we have human personality. And so we have both. We have who are we as a soul, but we also have a personality that was determined per lifetime, basically, of being easygoing, being analytical, just depending on how we plan our current incarnation.
Yeah, big time. I mean, reading people's astrological charts and watching what they come in with, like, there's like a yeah, I absolutely love doing that work. It's interesting because I wanted to start to understand how this came to you because on some level, you're doing well, for sorry, I don't wanna date you, but decades, you've been doing past life regressions, and your past life regressions though is like, there's a person here, obviously you can believe in reincarnation, and then it's like, boom, you were this person here, and then boom, you were this person here, and it's obviously it looks linear because we're having this experience of consciousness, but doesn't necessarily have to be linear, eternal now. Anyway, I'm sure you can speak to that. But, you're going into people's past lives but then all of a sudden, we've gone from past lives, which seems somewhat tethered to being earthbound and, you know, to the conversation around souls. How did that start to materialize for you? Like, how did you, because that seems quite a shift, right? It's like there's three different types of souls, right? And then I've obviously done a cheeky thing and read your book. There's souls also is different to higher self, which is different to the life that the individuals have lived. So I think that hierarchy needs to be understood a little bit as well. And also, how did you come to this awareness around souls through studying past life regressions?
Yeah. Okay. Um, Great question. So the regression that I guide most often is called Between Lives Soul Regression. So it's not per se past life regression. So what is a between lives soul regression? I'll answer my own question here. So a between lives soul regression means I guide the client first into relaxation, um, and then I guide the client to discover whatever past life the guides of the client want them to discover. When the client experiences whatever past life they're taken to by their guides, that past life always explains something in current life. It explains a fear, a relationship, a skill, an interest in an era of time. We move through the past life scene by scene. Ultimately, we go to the final scene in the regression, and probably people understand, but just to be sure they understand, regression means I'm not giving the information to the client. I'm supporting the client, and they're giving me the information. So we move through the past life, through whatever scenes the guide really wants the client to learn about. We go all the way to the final scene. We basically close the life because we need to go to what I lovingly call the death scene. This doesn't mean the client's going to feel the level of discomfort of, dying from pneumonia 400 years ago. The client's going to know how they pass, but they're not going to feel that level of, in their own current body. Um, we close the life, and then the client experiences what happens every time we pass or transition. The slice of our soul, the portion of our soul that we bring into body at birth that causes us to be alive, that aspect, that slice of our soul, it's holographic, um, leaves the non functioning body when the past life is over and elevates from 3D through what we call the astral plane or fourth dimension back to where, and I always have to do this with my hands. It's sort of like stepping back into the higher self. So that piece of the client's soul reintegrates, it returns back to where the higher self of the client resides and sort of reconstitutes, steps back into the higher self. Then the remainder of the regression happens at the client's level of higher self with at least one guide, if not more than one guide. So this is more than what we call past life regression. That's how I've learned what I've learned. And I'll add just one more quick piece because a lot of people will say what you mentioned a few minutes ago, that the spiritual realm is timeless, that the spiritual realm exists outside of time and space. In regard to soul evolution, that is honestly not valid. Our lives are a series of incarnations are happening in real time, what we humans call real time, because that's how our soul evolves lifetime to lifetime. It's just like going to school. It's like we go to first grade before we go to second grade, before we go to third grade, and so on. So the spiritual realm exists in current time. It isn't, a lot of people talk about it in this manner, but it isn't some I hate to call it airy-fairy or hocus pocus, but, it isn't some, overly romanticized perspective of, "Oh, all time collapses and all lives are happening at once." That's honestly not true.
Hey there, inspired souls. We just hit 300,000 subscribers. Touchwood. Honestly, I've got to say something. I don't know what to say. Obviously, gratitude beaming out of it. Touchwood, thank you guys so much for your incredible love and support at this juncture to celebrate reaching 300,000 subscribers. We're giving away a month's worth of access to the community. Come join us on the inside. This month's guest is Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys. You can ask him anything you want. We do weekly Q&As. There's so much goodness inside the community. You can get access to the community for $1. Just come join us inside the community, have some fun, meet us on the inside. And by joining the community this month, that's how you go into the draw. We're giving away heaps of stuff. We're going to give away a deep dive mentoring session. We're giving away astrology readings. We're giving away, there's one lucky winner will win an annual subscription to the community for free on us. Like, come on in. And also, as some of you started to hear, we're doing these inspired evolution experiences now, retreats to Egypt, to Hawaii, Colorado, hopefully England. We want to go to Stonehenge, some really cool places that we want to get to, Touchwood. And so, yeah, if one lucky winner will win $200 off on an inspired evolution experience as well. So much goodness. And like, I'm going to put a link in the caption around here somewhere it's our way of saying thank you so much for your support. Join us on the inside of the community. Come hang out for a minute as well. Go into the draw to win all of these incredible prizes. I probably haven't mentioned all of them, so check the link and all that sort of stuff in the caption, and I'm sure you'll find out more about it. And all you have to do to enter is join the community for the month for the $1. That's all you have to do. So come join us on the inside. I'd love to say good day and see you there, and just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I feel like I've got a healthy sense of cognitive dissonance to it. Like 300 out. Like, what is actually going on? Guys, thank you so much for your love and support. See you on the inside in the community.
That is really interesting because, again, my worldview, and just to sort of ask you a question from here is, yeah, human beings, we're having an experience of time as linear, so that we can have experiences that enrich us and ergo the higher self, and then, like you pointed to, the soul. And it's really interesting to hear you share that, yes, and the soul, Amrit, is here to learn through experience. So it too is bound by time and space. Yeah, when the way you're describing it makes a lot of sense because it's here to pick up the experience as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's totally correct. It's sort of like, I know you went through a shift in your life that led you to do, what we're doing today. I too went through a shift in my life that I'm happy to talk about if you want me to, a number of years ago that led
Please.
me to do what
Yeah.
I do. And it's those shifts that are part of what you just said. It's those shifts that are part of, oh, I came into body and I was doing X kind of work. But something happened and we could say, your eyes were opened, my eyes were opened. And I chose to alter My focus, alter in many ways how I spend my time, alter how I see my life, and that too happened for me, and that I think is what you're referring to when you talk about this ongoing process of evolution.
You're gonna have to tell us what happened for you.
Okay. All right. I'm happy to let me see if I can make it fairly short. So, in 1993, and this is the way I always tell it, in 1993, I was minding my own business as a psychologist in general private practice. I'd been doing general counseling, psychology work for, I don't know, 12 to 15 years. I thought I knew. Why I did what I did. I thought I knew, what I would be doing with the rest of my career, but obviously I didn't. So in 1993, as a psychologist, I had interests. I did a lot of couples counseling. Um, I had a strong interest in working with clients tied to death, dying, grief, chronic illness, chronic pain, um, and that sort of thing. In in 1993, my original psychologist colleague, so I'm in my middle 40s at the time in 93. Sadly, from a human standpoint, my colleague passes from a type of lung cancer. Within probably about 48 hours of his passing in the spring of 93, I start having spiritual experiences that I've never experienced before, and I'm obviously well into my adult life. I'm in my middle 40s. Two things happened for me. I began to intuit and be sure, based on what I was feeling, that my colleague was communicating to me, we might say, from the other side. I didn't know how that worked, but I didn't have much of any doubt that my colleague was basically intuitively communicating to me from the other side. Along with that, and I knew just a little bit about reincarnation. I wasn't sure whether I believed in it. I certainly didn't know, I would say, anything about soul. Along with sensing the communication from my colleague, I began in my mind's eye, in the darkness of my room, of my bedroom in the morning and at night, I began to sense that I was in a, you might say, a clairvoyant manner. I was seeing scenes in my mind's eye of past lives we had shared, that my colleague and I had shared. So I had sort of a, you might say, fancy word, a bifurcated response. My left brain and my psychologist self said, "Oh, but Linda, if you go down this rabbit hole, you'll never have another referral." The most of my referrals back then in the 90s came from medical doctors. So I thought, oh, that'll be the end of my psychologist career. But the other part of me, honestly, was completely fascinated, and this is where and like you as well, where it's almost like it's like a bell ringing in your head or something like, "Okay, I've been doing a certain kind of work, but it's not really feeling satisfactory," or, whatever. Well, that began to happen for me. So, I was married. I am still married to the same person. Um, my husband and I have always been very progressive, very liberal, but we had never talked about soul. We'd never talked about reincarnation, which now today feels kind of weird. And, you know, why hadn't we talked about it? Because my husband is as spiritually oriented as I am. But anyway, so um, I decided I better tell my husband what was going on with me. So I did. He sat down, 2, 3 days after the passing of my colleague. He knew my colleague well. And so I began to explain to my husband what I was experiencing. He looked back at me with a very calm look on that day, which I obviously still remember. And so I said to him, "Why don't you think this is really, really strange?" And my husband is a retired university professor and administrator. So, we both have a certain amount of left brain capability. So, anyway, I said to my husband, Don't you think this is just crazy stuff?" And my husband said, "No, I don't." So, I very quickly said, "Why don't you think this is weird?" I'm sure on that day, I almost hoped my husband would say, "Here's a way we can just stop this conversation and forget about it, and, you'll
Just
go
button it
right back,
down, put a pin in it. Yeah.
be conventional again, blah, blah, blah." So I said to my husband, "Why are you just so okay with this?" And so here's what he said. Totally true story. Um, my husband and I are about the same age. So he said, I think I have blocked out something that happened to me as a boy that I now remember. And I said, "Well, okay, but what are you talking about?" And he said to me, "Yeah, now I remember distinctly that when I was a boy growing up, maybe about age 10, he said, when I could go outside and be by myself, I'd go outside, I'd lay on my back on the ground, I'd watch the clouds move in the sky, and around age 10, I began to spontaneously, my husband began to spontaneously remember his past lives in detail. And he said to me, I knew they were my lives. I knew they were past lives. I knew they were real. Don't ask me how I knew. But back in the middle 50s, when he was about 10 years old, he said, nobody talked about that. Nobody in my world ever spoke about those kinds of things. And so he said, apparently, I just blocked it all out until today in 1993 when you're telling me what you're telling me. So my husband's not a psychologist, he's a political scientist, and, he said, "Go for it. If you're open and you're interested, I'll go with you to workshops, programs, trainings. I won't go with you." But that was permission for me. It was somebody close to me in my life, obviously my husband, um, just said, "Okay, then go down that road if that's what you want to do." And so that's what happened.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It does beg the question a little bit around, given the conversation we're in, around soul contracts, because that could have very easily been a very different husband somewhere saying a very different thing, and you might be doing something very different right now, and you and I wouldn't be here having this conversation. So, what do you think about soul contracts? Like, are there certain, is there a
Yeah.
thing like soul contracts? Can you unpack
Oh,
that
yeah,
a little bit with us?
that's a beautiful and important question, honestly. Well, let me just say before I just, answer the question about
Please.
soul contracts, um, theoretically, let's just say I had a different husband, and I had a husband, as a lot of people do when they have these aha moments, as I was having a sizable aha moment. If I had a different husband and he had said to me, "Oh, honey, you've lost it, and, this is
Go pick
bizarre.
up the baubles. Yeah, yeah.
Talk to me about this anymore. How many glasses of wine have you had this afternoon?" Or something like that, which I had not had any wine that particular day. Um, then I still had free will choice. I could have just said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I just feel drawn to this," and that's not what happened, but that does happen for some people. But, yes, the notion of soul contracts, which now, 32 plus years later, I have no doubt I know quite a bit about past lives I've shared with my husband, and I understand now, that this was a step in our journey together, and a lot of other things unfolded after, he said, "Oh, yeah, I knew about my past lives when I was a boy growing up." So, yes, we do I mean, we could talk a lot, if you want, about soul contracts because yes, we do make soul contracts, but what's important, I think, for listeners to always remember is we always have free will. So, he could have said, "Oh, yeah, honey, I support you. Go for it." And I could have said, "No, no, no. I'm not comfortable. I need to continue being conventional. And no, I'm too nervous to, do something that seems weird to some people. So I'm not going down that road." Yeah.
So what was the rub? Can I ask you about it? What was the rub that really sent you down the road? Because you could, like you said, just as easily just gone back to your convention and you had an amazing career. I mean, Was it just the deep-seated fascination, or what was it that was driving you?
I think that I'll try to answer that in 2 ways, and the reason I say 2 ways is I'll answer it as best I can, from a human standpoint, from, what did Linda go through as she had to decide, as I had to decide what to do, and then I'll also answer it from a soul perspective because I think both are true. Um From a human perspective, well, I'll say one quick thing that you brought up, and that's what's cool about doing a conversation like this. My sun sign, I happen to be a Sagittarius. And so, I mean, and that's just a kind of one little point in obviously
Inside?
astrological
Inside,
chart is much more than just my sun sign, but,
of course.
Sagittarians tend to be, people that want to explore new things,
They're
people that
adventurous.
Yeah,
Adventurous.
exactly, and I'm a fire sign as well, so that gives me some of the impetus to, "Okay, I'm gonna do something maybe different than some people might have expected me to do," so that's a piece of the puzzle. Um but honestly, from a human standpoint, as best I remember now, so many years later, I was just completely fascinated with it was just like this yearning, craving, whatever you wanna call it, to understand more about soul. Who are we really? Where do we come from? I'm a question asker. I've always been that way. So, I think that's part of the rub, as you call it. But the other piece that I know now quite well is that I I know my primary guides. I know my higher self, and basically my guides and my higher self where, it's almost like handing me a you might say a plate of options and saying, "Okay, Linda, you have free will, but we're gonna encourage you to, choose some of these spiritual soul reincarnation options." I think there was an influence that I didn't understand back then, but I also think I was being influenced by the higher realm.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I do wanna get more into soul contracts, and just before I do, I want us to have a better picture if you can give us the lay of the land, which is sounds very earthen, but it's more the realms. Um, we've discussed being incarnate. You've mentioned a higher self. Can I ask a quick question there?
Sure.
Each individual has an individual higher self?
Good question. Yes. So before we incarnate, before you were born, before I was born, before anybody listening, before they were born, um, I know this is going to sound sort of human sounding or a fancy word, anthropomorphic, but before we come into body, we basically have a meeting with our spiritual guides. So at the soul level, you know, people can I try to make it almost like a picture so it makes sense. So, we come to this meeting, we sit around a table, and a our soul, meets with the souls of our guides, and, we can say, "Well, okay, I think I'm ready for another incarnation." We can say, "I wanna wait a while longer." The more evolved we are as a soul, the more our guides give us latitude to make choices. The less evolved we are, the more our guides take charge of planning an incarnation. But essentially, yes, we sit down, if you will, and that's making it seem human, but we have a conference and we plan. Am I gonna be male or female? Am I gonna be tall or short? Am I going to be, of average intelligence? Am I gonna come in with some, human, challenge of some sort, a visual challenge, one arm isn't, of normal length or, whatever it might be. We make all kinds of choices. when we get into the body, obviously, again, we have free will. We can't change whether we're tall or short, but there are a lot of things we could go against if we wanted to. But yes, we contract with other souls to be our mother, to be our father, to be our siblings, and we plan a life. Um, I mean, there's so many topics that fit with this. So I'll add in one more quick piece that might
Please.
pop into your mind to ask. As a soul, when our soul is created and when our soul is young, we belong to a small group of souls. I like to call it a soul pod. You could call it a soul group. So the members of that soul pod, somewhere in the range of 10 to 15 souls, those are the souls with whom we incarnate most often. And then it's almost like concentric circles, or it's almost like a stem of grapes. It's like there's a pod next door, or there's, think about a stem of grapes. There's 2 or 3 grapes that sit pretty close to the grape we're going to pluck off the stem to eat. So, quick example would be uh, I have 2 children. Um, one of my children is in the soul pod that in my own soul pod. My other child, our other child, is in one of those pods next door. And so I've had more lives with my immediate pod, and you might say that the next, the somewhat lesser, but the next greatest number of lives with the members of that adjacent pod. So that's part of how we plan parents, grandparents, children, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's incredibly fascinating. So help me here because we're also talking about souls, but I think there's a distinction between higher self and soul. And so there's the earthbound self, there's the higher self, and then there's a soul. Have I got it correct? Mike?
Not quite.
Please. Yeah, if you could.
So, okay, when we're incarnate, um, we bring this what I referred to a little bit earlier. We bring a holographic portion. Think about an old. Here in America, we eat pies, and so think about cutting a slice of pie out of a full pie. That slice of pie has the same ingredients as the entire pie. When
Correct.
we come into body, we bring a slice of our soul energy, if you will, a slice of our soul pie, a percentage, a portion that causes us to live and breathe.
So soul and higher self are interchangeable, so they're both one and the same effectively.
Yes, exactly. Ex
Great. So
exactly.
in there, like let's say I've taken a slice of this pie, question. Can that pie, another slice of that pie potentially be residing in another earthbound body?
Mm, that's a great question. The answer is yes. Yes. That is
Whoa.
called when
Yeah, what?
yeah, that's a beautiful question. And so that's what we call split incarnation. Only rather experienced souls can manage energetically 2 incarnations at once. And so we call that split incarnation. Um, it doesn't mean that both people were born on the same day and will transition on the same day. It simply means that there's an overlap in the time frame of that split incarnation. Purpose of split incarnation is basically 2 things. One, it speeds up the evolution of the entirety of that soul, because each incarnation can balance different aspects of karma. Another reason for split incarnation is that that soul has a greater impact on humanity because there's two different people who can impact our human culture.
It- Is it common?
Best answer is no. It's not common, but it is common with more experienced souls. And so there are certain souls, there are certain souls that keep incarnating on Earth. There are certain long-standing souls. One example would be, just to put a name to it, the soul of the famous, well-known person known as Gandhi. Very evolved soul. That soul has been incarnating and continues to incarnate on Earth, continues to incarnate to this day because that's a highly evolved soul.
Hey there, Inspired Souls. Spirituality is not something we just talk about here at the Inspired Evolution. It's something we live and breathe with our entire beings. Whether it's in your career, your life, the way you lead in the world, or your relationships, it's at the heart of the way we believe life should be lived. And so if you're feeling out of alignment, or you can feel that there's something more, or you're feeling like you're not thriving in life, touch wood, the way that you ought to be, then we've got guidance to take you even deeper. You've got support from me one-on-one, and you've also got a like-minded, like-hearted community masterminding, master-hearting together through guidance together. And you don't have to take my word for it. This is how people all over the world have transformed through guidance.
Everything just kind of fell into place, and now I'm on a path that I actually believe in and I'm excited about because I feel like I'm becoming my best self.
Over those 2 years, I have done so much. I can't believe where I am now. I'm thrilled where I am now. Not only was he a coach, but he became a divine presence in my life.
You can show up to Amrit with all sorts of chaos in your life and you leave feeling completely centered with some direction that is going to get you results. It's just magic when you're in coaching with Amrit. You just flow with it all.
I feel that I have access and connection to somebody who is deeply entrenched in my development.
If you're thinking about it, just do it. You won't regret it.
So what are you waiting for? If you feel the call, then join me on a call. amritsandhu.com/call. Link on screen now and also at the top of the description in the show notes below. Join me in a call. Let's dive in deep to your path, onwards, upwards, and inwards from here. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a call. Go on, I'll see you there.
There are many questions I've got in and around there. Some people use the language of oversoul. What are they referring to? Or is there such a thing?
My best sense is when people use the term oversoul, that means higher self.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, sweet. So it's all there's a soul and then you're incarnate there. So from here you were talking about contracts, which is actually really fascinating because there are certain things that play out, and I mean some I'm sure are positive and some are challenging, and I think many people in the spiritual let's call it domain or exploration sort of sometimes when life is going through some challenges or some particular person is challenging them can sometimes say, oh, that must be a soul contract because that person is challenging me, but I know I'm meant to be with this person or around this person because actually they're teaching me something about, a lesson that an experience that's really soulfully enriching, but enriching in like a real learning your boundaries or learning to say no kind of ways, right?
Yes.
Um,
That's totally valid.
but sometimes I do wonder if, being spiritual, sometimes people can lean too much into, I don't want to say there's too much acceptance because obviously acceptance is a beautiful thing. But how do you know where to draw the line between like, this is a lesson for the soul, I'm trying to lean into your background with psychology here a little bit as well, is like, how do you know when like enough's enough as well? Do you know what I mean? Like it's a bit of a gray area there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, no, again, that makes perfect sense what you're asking. Well, I think it varies person to person. I think some people are going to persevere longer than others. It's interesting. Maybe this will answer. It just drops into my brain, so probably my guides dropped it in. So I'll answer it this way and see if this answers your question. Okay. Oftentimes, I mean, I guide regression. I've guided regression multiple times a week, most weeks for years. So what I know, and regression is fascinating. It continues to fascinate me. It's part of the reason I continue to do it. But so if I'm guiding a client in the type of regression I've explained, and the client learns that they are an interplanetary soul, And interplanetary souls tend to have greater challenges. It's always hard to make this such a black and white statement, but interplanetary souls, because they're not used to humanity, interplanetary souls come to Earth obviously with purpose, but sometimes it's not easy to be an interplanetary soul on Earth. Usually, if my client is an interplanetary soul and they have some kind of long-standing romantic relationship, they have some kind of a life partner. Almost always their life partner is an Earth-based soul. Because the Earth-based soul helps, I always have to talk with my hands, the Earth-based soul helps ground them, and so that's like an agreement between those two souls. But sometimes, probably, the IP member of the partnership wishes the Earth-based soul was a little bit more spiritual or a little bit more
Open.
right-brained, and vice versa. And yet, they're meant to be together because they, the Earth-based partner is benefiting from the more right-brained perspective. So, it cuts both ways in terms of benefits, but it's like sometimes I help spouses understand, yeah, I need to stay with him. I need to stay with her because, yeah, we have a lot more positive than we don't. And he helps ground me. She helps ground me in that sense.
You've mentioned guides a few times. Um, yeah. What guides? What are guides? Are they other souls? Yeah, can you describe guides and other
Yeah.
maybe there's different types of guides. I don't know. I've just got an open curiosity.
Important for people to understand guides. Um, Let me start with Earth-based souls because there's a little bit of a difference in regard to guides if we're talking about Earth-based souls versus interplanetary or angelic souls. An Earth-based soul always has a lead or a senior or a primary spiritual guide. That spiritual guide is a soul that functions from the spiritual realm and influences us intuitively, um, helps us make decisions. Um, uh, so, we could talk, well, I'll say just a little bit about intuition. So, how do our guides, how do they show up? How do they guide us? Well, probably a couple of ways. Um, One is intuition. And I know there are probably going to be some listeners that are going to go, oh, yeah, I accept that I'm intuitive. And other listeners are going to say, oh, no, I don't think I'm really intuitive. Linda's intuitive. You're intuitive. But we're all intuitive. So guides work through intuition, but they also work through how much they can influence um, circumstances in our life. So let's just say someone works for a company and they're ready to alter the role that they have in that company. So they apply for a different position that becomes open. And something weird happens, something that doesn't really make sense to them. They feel qualified, blah, blah, blah. They don't get the position. They apply again, maybe 3 months later, for another opening at their company. Again, something that doesn't really make sense happens and they don't get the position. Sometimes that's a guide's way of saying, you've thought about leaving that company? Think more seriously about leaving that company and either doing something else or applying to a different company. So guides have that ability as well. They don't, guides can't come down here and solve the disagreements between countries and things like that, but they can influence. So again, an earth-based soul has a primary spiritual guide that is not the client's own higher self, even though our higher self also impacts us. Okay, so that's an earth-based soul.
Is that
Interplanetary,
guide usually another? Sorry, is that
yeah,
guide usually another Earth-based soul?
it is
Or doesn't
almost
always?
always, probably nearly always, if not always, another earth-based soul. And because I'm glad you asked that, it's also a soul that is somewhat more evolved
A
than
bit
we
more,
are.
done a couple more revolutions.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. A
Yeah,
couple more
makes
steps on
sense.
the ladder of evolution.
Yeah, awesome. And about that, soul as well, sorry, I know we're in the middle of what you were sharing. Um, do they could they potentially be incarnate at the time as well, or probably not?
Yes, some are, and I mean, great questions. Yes, some are and some aren't. Some of our guides are incarnate, some of our guides are not incarnate. It just varies.
Sure, and so while they're incarnate is, somewhere we may physically meet them, but also, you know, it's happening on a soul level, like you described before. Some of the things that are manifesting and being blocked or being opened up potentially are being guided on a much deeper
Exactly.
level as well.
Yes,
Fascinating.
yes.
Sorry
And
for interrupting. Please. Yeah.
another quick piece, no, that's fine because then other things drop into my brain to share. Another quick piece to say, because I bet people wonder about what I'm about to say. Um, Loved ones on the other side, grandparents, I
Great.
mean, whoever it
Yeah.
might be, a great friend that sadly passed at an age that seemed too young to pass or whatever. Um, we can also have guides that are loved ones on the other side, but usually those loved ones aren't our primary spiritual guide. They're part of a team of guides. It's not to say they're not available, and it's not to say they don't influence us because they do. I'm influenced sometimes. My father passed 20 years ago. Sometimes he pops in and I can feel him giving me advice, but he's not my primary spiritual guide. Yeah.
Do you think
Okay.
some people might be feeling let down by only having one primary spiritual guide?
Well, i- what's important is that people, especially if you're an earth-based soul, most earth-based souls have a team. So it's a lead guide, like sort of like the tip of the arrow, so to speak. But there's a team. And that's why, I mean, when my father pops in, for example, my father was a very good financial manager. He pops in at times if I'm trying to make a financial decision and starts giving me advice. And it's usually great advice, to be honest, but he's not my lead guide.
Awesome. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay. So, um, interplanetary souls and angelic realm souls are somewhat different in terms of guides. And for most, what I call IP, interplanetary, or AR, angelic realm, most IP souls and most AR souls are guided primarily by their higher self. And the reason for that is because when an IP or an AR comes to Earth, they are coming to Earth as a rather evolved soul. Not necessarily a 10 on a scale of 10 of evolution, but probably at least a 7 or an 8. If an IP or AR comes to Earth, they are rather advanced as a soul. Therefore, their own higher self is very capable and serves as their main guide. Yeah,
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Yep, and both of them share the same qualities in that regard.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Do earthbound souls ever have an interplanetary guide, or does that ever happen? Like, yeah.
Yes, I think the reason that would happen if an earth-based soul is quite experienced, and it's always easier to put it on the 10-point scale. If an earth-based soul is a 7 or an 8, for example, um, most earth-based souls that have reached that level of evolution have had a few um, non-Earth past lives. So, like, I know I've not had a lot of past lives that happened somewhere that wasn't Earth, but I've had a few because that helps me understand interplanetary existence. And so if I need, just use myself as an example, if I need some kind of input from a guide that has interplanetary experience, then an interplanetary guide would step in to assist me. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that want to connect to their guides?
Yes, for sure. That would be a couple of things, but overall suggestion would be to trust intuition and to practice intuition and do that sometimes people will say, well, Linda, I don't meditate. You don't have to meditate. I mean, it's fine to meditate if that's what you do, but using any kind of intuitive practice that could mean, opening up a journal and putting a pen down on the paper and then starting to just write what comes to you. Um, it could be staring into the flame of a candle. A lot of people, I'm trained in a lot of shamanic practice. Using drumming is another way, using certain kinds of music. Um, use whatever helps you relax, helps you just sort of tap in more to what you might call your right brain, is a way of connecting with guides.
I love that. You've said that more interplanetary and angelic souls are being urgently prepared to incarnate here at this time. What is this cosmic emergency, in your opinion, that Earth is experiencing? And
Yeah.
yeah, is it emergency? Is it emergence? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, I hate to make it sound so dramatic or critical as to call it an emergency. And of course, in some ways, it's an interesting word to use because we could just say what's emerging versus what is an emergency.
Mhm.
But we think about so many things going on our planet right now. We think about countries battling with each other. We think about, I mean, in my humble opinion, there's so many political issues. There are, there are terrorist organizations. We need to, in my opinion, pay better attention to needs of the earth, needs of our oceans, climate change, and all of that. So what happens is the higher realm, um, I guess I'll put it this way. The higher realm, whether we're talking about higher earth-based souls, like the higher selves of earth-based souls, or the higher selves of interplanetary and angelic realm souls, um, those souls begin, you might say, to use a human word, begin to brainstorm. It's sort of like, okay, we see a group of people, we see a type of genocide on the planet, for example. Um, higher selves brainstorming, what can we do to try to aid humans to make better choices? So, one of the things that uh, it's my understanding is happening is preparation of more advanced souls to come to Earth, to embody on Earth, to help come up with more advanced ways of facing human cultural issues.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. When there's a little bit of there's a sliver of skepticism here, so I'll just speak to that really quickly. There's
Yeah.
and yeah, just add that to the frame as I ask this question, which is when I've met people that have had regressions and you speak to them in their past life, they're always someone of note.
Oh, and that is
And I've never met, it's like, hey, in my last life I was Larry. And it was like, I've very rarely have I don't think I've ever met anybody that's had a past life regression, that's spoken to me about their past life regression and is like, oh yeah, in my past life I was Larry. The only person that really comes to mind was Matthias de Stefano, who's a very interesting character. We've had,
yes, I
gosh,
know
what's
who
that
he
character?
is.
But
Yeah,
he's been on the podcast and remembers all of his past lives, and
yeah.
he's had a very tough but rich in life. But yeah, it's do you know what I mean? Like that bit always leaves me a little bit skeptical.
Uh, I can tell you that because I guide regression so frequently, most of my clients do not go to notable past lives. I would say, oh my goodness, probably 80 to 90% of my clients go to past lives where we don't exactly know who the person was. We know what happened in that past life, but they're not, some famous, notable, documentable person. That almost never happens when I guide regression.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned Mahatma Gandhi before. I wanted to dive into some of this because you said like shares a soul with Moses. I mean, there's so much here to unpack. Mandela, like there's a lot going on in there. Can you bring us into this enriching insight?
Yes. We have certain highly advanced souls. Gandhi's just one example, that have been incarnating for thousands of years and continue to incarnate. So, yes, as you've obviously listened to me talk about, for example, the soul of Gandhi is the same soul as Nelson Mandela. And if we think about the orientation of the life of Gandhi or the life of Mandela, then we see nonviolence. I mean, that's obviously what Gandhi stood for, was nonviolence. Now, obviously, most humans are not um, advanced to that degree. Most humans are not unnameable, like Gandhi, are not a nameable soul, but there are advanced souls that continue to function in the higher realm, and in some cases still incarnate. Um, I mean, there are a couple of examples we could talk about. I know from guiding clients that, um, there are times when I guide a client who's an angelic soul that some of the archangels are real. The archangels are the, um, most advanced members of the angelic realm, and I'm not talking now about religion, I'm talking about souls. Um, and there are some of the archangels that continue to incarnate on earth. And but they're not, so people might start thinking, "Oh, well, um the Pope, for example, is an archangel." Most of the time, if a highly advanced soul incarnates, it could be your next door neighbor. It could be your second grade daughter's teacher. Um, these advanced souls sometimes come into body as just average, but to a degree, principled people, but they're not necessarily some famous person that writes books or stands on a stage, um, at all. And that's where I hope that, listeners will, you might say, de-glamorize, if that is a word, de-glamorize the whole thing about spirituality, because these advanced souls can be anybody.
Can you I mean, the soul of someone like Christ, what are your I mean, I don't even know where to begin the question, to be honest. The soul of someone like Jesus Christ. They come in and yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting you're asking that because that was on my mind just a few minutes ago. Okay. So, the soul of the one that, Christianity calls Christ. First of all, when that soul was the most common name would be Jesus of Nazareth. When that soul was Jesus of Nazareth, first of all, that soul's name was not Jesus. People can track this historically. That soul had a Hebrew name, and that soul's name was Yeshua. That soul was not called Jesus. Jesus is a name given to that soul. Jesus is a Greek word given to that soul post crucifixion. And so there are more than one spiritual people, authors that have, including Edgar Casey being one, who tracked the past lives of the soul of the one I call Yeshua, because that's what his name was in that lifetime, born in Nazareth, in that era of time. The soul of Yeshua is a highly advanced guide, but not well, I think even people who understand Christianity, um, Yeshua didn't create Christianity. It's people that came after Yeshua was in body, after that soul was in body. Um, and so we as humans easily get caught. I don't, I'm not trying to denigrate religion. All I'm saying is that certain aspects of religion are human created. And it's not to say religion doesn't serve a purpose for some people. And so when we talk about Christ or Jesus Christ, we're 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 focusing on a perspective that was created, and I know probably some people listening aren't going to agree with this. Um, we have to think about Yeshua as a soul that came into body on earth. And why did that soul come into body on earth? Well, think about some of the teachings that that soul intended. And unfortunately, some of those teachings we don't live by. Certain people don't live by. So again, I think we have to, de-glamorize is not a really good word, but we have to take it out of some more sensational, um, packaged spirituality, if I can put it that way, and bring it down to what did that soul come to teach, and has that benefited humanity? Yeah.
I'm sure some people are asking the question, these souls that you've referenced, there's been about 4 already. Are they interplanetary? Are they angelic?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is my understanding that Yeshua, Gandhi, um, the Gandhi soul, as you've heard me talk about, because you mentioned it, is the soul we know as Moses.
Yeah.
Those are earth-based souls. Um, yeah, those are not interplanetary souls. Those are earth-based souls. Um, yeah, where that leads, all these segues, where that leads my mind to, which I think is probably a useful segue.
Please.
The three oldest civilizations on Earth are the Egyptian civilization, and again, people can track this historically. The three oldest civilizations, not the three locations on Earth where intelligent life began, intelligent incarnation began, but where civilization began. One is Egypt. Another is what we used to call Mesopotamia, which is where the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers come together. And then there was a civilization, people can find this on the internet, that is called the Indus, Indus, the Indus River civilization, that was one of the three oldest civilizations that existed along a river in what today is southern Pakistan. Those three civilizations had earth-based souls and interplanetary souls and angelic realm souls involved in the development of those civilizations. Yeah.
Do you believe they had an awareness of the different soul archetypes as they were navigating reality at that time, potentially? Or hard to say?
That's a really good question. My best answer is yes. I've spent a fair amount of time in Egypt, in the ancient sites in Egypt. Um, And as I mentioned much earlier, I have a colleague who lives in Luxor and is an interplanetary soul, and she has an incredible ability to tap into what we might call the portals of wisdom, the portals of connecting across the veil. Um, and she actually lives in the Valley of the Queens, um, in Luxor. And so she and I often collaborate in teaching and that sort of thing. Um, yes, I think the best answer is yes, that in that era of time, um, there was an understanding of all three types of souls. Um, and in the era of time of early civilization, there was also the ability, like 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, there was the ability for a soul to materialize in an adult body and dematerialize. That has not happened energetically in thousands of years, but I do know that was possible, like I say, 4 to 5, maybe 6,000 years ago.
Can you unpack that a little bit? So a soul comes into a body, but isn't the soul the same as the life spark that body's carrying? So if it dematerializes, does that body just collapse? Like what? Mhm.
Yes, the soul, again, my understanding is, souls could come into body without going through the birth process, and because of the energetic differences that existed back then,
Mm.
a soul could materialize as an adult human, and then that soul could leave that dense body, that dense human body, and the dense human body would no longer exist. That hasn't happened in thousands of years, and my understanding is that is not possible energetically any longer. It has to do it becomes really, complex and sometimes even boggles my mind to try to
Mm.
understand it. But there are places, on the planet that you would call energetic portals. One would be Sedona, Arizona. Sedona, Arizona is a very, you might say, thin place,
Yep.
fluid place. I've
It's
spent quite a
incredible.
bit of time. I used to live close to Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I lived about a half an hour from there for a number of years. Um, and it's not the only portal. There are other portals. New Orleans, Louisiana is a portal. There are places outside the United States, of course, that are energetic portals, where the veil is thinner. Um, and access is easier. Now, some of these places are challenging. Spiritual people sometimes have a hard time spending a lot of time in these locations because the energy is so intense. Yeah, but there are portals on the planet in various locations.
And it's really interesting because what you were saying before was also this energetic, like almost like the energetic substrate of what we live through, what we're living in, has also transformed over time because, like you said, that wasn't available to us. Now it does open up a really interesting curiosity point in terms of, hey, like what's shifting and changing and evolving over time energetically and what we had and are we becoming more denser? I think the Hindus had some awareness of this, right? They called it the different ages that we
Yeah,
were going through.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's honestly why I do what I do, because I find it fascinating, and it also just helps inform more people to understand who we are, why we are, where we come from, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you that question closer towards the end, but you know, it was, why is this so important to know what we're discussing today?
Oh, I think it's interesting. Some questions are not so simple to answer, and interestingly enough, and it's probably because my guides at times are dropping things into my mind as you and I are talking. Because humanity is struggling to evolve. And so we have, I mean, I don't want to become overly political or complicated with this, but it's like, we have a country on the border of Ukraine that is not recognizing the sovereignty of a country. And so that's just one. There are many, many other examples. But because humanity, and I don't want to imply to listeners that humanity is a complete mess, so to speak, because humanity is not a complete mess. I don't think that, and I don't believe that. But we have certain issues going on that we need more evolved ways of dealing with these issues. And so I think that's why it's so important to understand.
Yeah, it does. I find this conversation actually gives us a lot more import for the individual life that we're living as well. And also, it was really inspiring, to hear that, the kind of souls that, if there are different types of souls, I think would be quick to sort of rush and sort of say, oh, like the ascended masters that have come through as a time, interplanetary souls or angelic souls, but to also hear that they are earthbound souls. They've done the work and they've, then chosen to come back and, help, support, guide means, we're all on that journey in some ways as well. Like, isn't that quite an inspiring
Oh,
message?
I think that's so true that we're all on the journey, and it's not some, well-known teacher or well-known author or whatever. We all can impact our culture.
I wanted to get into the weeds a little bit because there was a point there where you discovered you were cleaning up your karma with your mother, who was one of your abandoned daughters in a past life. And
Yeah.
as you were, holding her as she passed, kind of that, yeah, I think because like sometimes we're looking for the moments in life, and I feel like I
Mhm.
find this in my coaching and sometimes in astrology as well. Like I'm just like, hey, in all the interstitial moments is where life is happening. Life is the thing that's happening as you're busy making plans. you know?
Yes, exactly. For sure, for sure. Yes, I mean, there's so many ways that are just so beautiful, but yes, you're right. I mean, that was a great blessing for me to persevere and make sure my mother was cared for until she passed, and to discover why I needed to balance my own karma by caring for her and end up feeling complete with her when she passed. That was a gift for me.
I also found that you mentioned earlier in the podcast about that we always have free will, and I think that's a really important thread in the conversation. Um, but I think I heard you say somewhere else that it's also like being here on Earth is an experiment in
Mm,
free will.
mm.
And I mean, I can't even visualize free will collapsing because it feels like such a thread through the fabric of everything that we've got. But what happens if something like free will collapses? It's a trippy question that came to me.
It's my understanding from, being able to connect at times with guides, that guide Earth, um, that on Earth, free will is not going to collapse because it is one of the, um how can I say it? It's just one of the, aspects of the structure of the creation of humanity, is that we have free will, and therefore, because we have free will, it means it falls on your shoulders, it falls on my shoulders, it falls on everybody else's shoulders to take conscious behavioral steps to whether it's how you treat your next door neighbor. Silly example would be, we have some new neighbors in our neighborhood that just moved in a few days ago, and they reached out to meet us, the across the street neighbors. It's like to reach out to people and be supportive. That's just a simple thing to do. That's beneficial. I don't think free will is ever going to collapse in human culture.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of we had a gentleman on the podcast. His name's Darius J. Wright, and he helps support people with out of body experiences
Mhm.
for healing. And it's really incredible. And he's had some incredible experiences where he talks about this is the construct that we live in, and the fabric of it, of this particular construct, is very like it is free will, but there are potentially other constructs that aren't governed by free will. And it's like even just thinking about what that must be. Anyway, there's a whole nother podcast on that. Yeah, I wanted to also ask, like, we touched on this a little bit earlier with soul contracts, but when clients of yours discover that they have abusive parents, right? Or they've had tragic circumstances, how do you help them understand that choice from a soul-based level without actually spiritual bypassing their pain?
Mm. And are you talking about they've had challenging experiences in current life?
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting what that brings to mind. Yeah, let me answer it in 2 ways. One would be that human emotion is I is a healing tool. I mean, I mean, obviously, as a psychologist, I learned this a long time ago that, especially, working with people who are grieving the loss of someone, the loss of someone through transition, through passing, we have to deal with our human emotions. We have to. Um, it's an evolutionary step to allow our emotions, to trust our emotions and let them be there. It's not an evolutionary step to get stuck in our emotions. So, and sure, it's like, where's the gray area? Where's the dividing line between feeling our emotions and getting stuck in them? But nonetheless, we have to allow our emotions to be there, um, and not deny how we're feeling. But your question also brought to mind um, an organization that I offer my time and perspective and expertise. Has nothing to do with being paid for what I do. And it's an organization called Helping Parents Heal. It was founded by a woman in the United States, but it has become an international organization. It's an organization to assist parents, siblings, where there's been the passing of a child. And so there are families that have had a child pass. Doesn't matter how old the child was, but it's the tied to, helping parents heal, helping grandparents heal, helping siblings heal, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but what I love about helpingparentsheal.org, so it's a plug for this wonderful organization, um, is that it's all about the perspective that if you're having to face the human transition of a child, the body goes away, but the soul doesn't go away. That the soul is available, you know, the soul is immortal. And as a lot of the people that get involved with this organization say, there is death, but there is no death. And so what I love is that the support system of this organization, or the perspective of this organization, is that you can continue to communicate and be influenced by and influence your loved one on the other side, in this case, a child. So, um, dealing with emotions is important, but understanding the soul is immortal is also important.
Inspired Soul Lumen beings, you're obviously enjoying this video, so please do give it a thumbs up and a like and join us in the conversation. What are you taking away from today's conversation? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below, and leave your questions that you would like me to ask in the future as well in the comments below. I'd be honored to ask them on your behalf.
It's a nuanced and sensitive conversation, because I'm sure some people, some people probably have an experience of the soul of, in
Mhm.
such a sad situation, but some people potentially do struggle with a delusion in that space as well. And it's probably difficult to disseminate one from the other, I imagine. Um,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to lay it on you. We're getting closer to the end. I can feel it. The question in its nature is, what is the purpose of it all? Because you've got souls. And they're coming through, and they're incarnating, and they're doing this, and we're going through lifetimes. Something we didn't get to discuss is earthbound souls do thousands of repetitions, and interplanetary souls 5's enough, but we're doing all these, we're coming through. Why? I know that's a really question that's timeless, but I wanted to ask you it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that's a strange question or an inappropriate question. Um, my answer, it, it, it feels important for my answer to be focused on where we are now. We are on Earth. We are incarnate souls, you, me, anybody listening. Um, we are um, souls in body on Earth. We may be Earth-based souls, we may be interplanetary souls, we may be angelic realm souls, but we agreed to be here on Earth at this time. And so I think what it's all about is being here with purpose, being on earth in an earth body with purpose for our own soul to grow and evolve, but to impact the culture of humanity. And my understanding is that's what it boils down to. And so I don't think that's a crazy question at all.
Couldn't help but reflect in your response on, yeah, just some of those souls that are bodhisattva souls where they take the bodhisattva vows, to keep coming back and helping until every single soul is liberated. It's quite a deep thing to do while you're incarnate, to be
Right,
conscious of your soul rather
right.
than making decisions on the soul side. I mean,
Mhm.
have you contemplated the bodhisattvas?
Well, when I think about the notion of a bodhisattva, I think what we're talking about um, is a rather experienced soul, not a 10 on a scale of 10. I'm not even sure there are souls that are 10s on a scale of 10. But my sense of a bodhisattva is that that's a 7 and 8, maybe even a 9 that says, I'm going to keep coming back into to body on earth to advance this culture until we reach a point of being a healthier culture. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible, incredible. Wow, we've covered so much ground and realms in today's podcast. Linda, for those that want to tune into you more, where do they find out more about Linda and what you're up to in the world?
Yeah, they can go to my website. That's the best place to find what I'm doing and what's available. So my website is Raven, like the bird, ravenheartcenter.com. Ravenheartcenter.com.
I'll add that to the show notes and the description below. Can I ask why the raven?
Yeah, good question. Easy to answer, actually. When my colleague passed in 1993, and I thought it was a weird thing to do back then, I found someone who channeled, who lived in the community where I lived at the time, and because I needed to validate that I was sensing my colleague and all of that. So when I went to this woman who could channel, she told me that my colleague would show up in unusual ways in my life as a raven. And sure enough, I had more than one sort of uncanny experience with ravens. And so when I decided to shift my work, that's where Raven Heart Center came from.
Oh, that's such a beautiful honoring. I'm so glad I asked. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it does open up the question because we've discussed guides before, but then I did have this question that was lingering in the back of my head before around like some people have like animal guides and animal totems that they really connect to in this
Right.
lifetime as
Right.
well.
Yeah, and guides have the ability to show up in all kinds of forms. And so, yes, guides can show up as animals as much as they can show up in human form. Yeah.
Linda, thank you for showing up in human form.
Totally my pleasure, and, I feel like my life is purposeful, everyone's life is purposeful, so, yes, I am pleased to be showing up in human form. Yeah,
Touch wood. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and sharing yourself so abundantly here with us
my
today. I'll
pleasure.
put a link to your site, also to some of the events that are coming up in your world, and also to the book in the show notes below as well. And yeah, and obviously, thank you for your time today and sharing yourself here. This has been an incredibly rich conversation, and also thank you so much for and following through and just yeah, it's as you have been doing this work for so long. Without projecting all over you, now these conversations are much more open and people are open to them. And I think that's a reflection on the time that we are
Yeah,
actually expanding our awareness, like collectively.
yeah,
But
sure.
you've been carrying this work when I'm sure I don't want to sound like this, even as a woman, like it would have been, yeah, yeah, just really, really, really grateful for you and who you
Yeah,
are. Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you for inviting me.
And one of the questions I had was, do soul pods grow over time? Like, you mentioned the grapes, and then do you end up with more souls in the soul pod over time, or is it?
No, good question. The members of the original soul pod and the size is the way it's going to be.
Ah, yeah, fascinating. Yeah, so your tribes.
Exactly.
And that bit also got me where you said one of your sons is like from within the soul pod, but one of them's from a neighboring one. Like I would just assume that, I don't know, in some conversations, like some people are like, oh, there's some NPCs out there. And I'm not sure if there are any NPCs, like non-player. Have you heard that conversation? It's like some of us are like, in the game, and some people are just like dummies. And I'm not sure that's accurate.
Yeah.
But I had this sort of, as you were describing it, this feeling that like, oh, we're more aware of people in our soul pod and neighboring soul pods, but then there are other soul pods and neighboring soul pods playing out their thing and our thing, and like kind of around each other.
Right.
But I never considered that potentially family members wouldn't be within the same soul pod. That really
No, they're often not. And
kind of caught
sometimes
me.
it's your best friends that are in the soul pod, and they're not blood family members.
How trippy, right? And this is why some people feel so connected to other
Yeah.
people in their life. They're like, that's my soul
Totally.
sister or my soul brother. And
Yeah.
yeah, they're actually onto something. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool.
I honestly could talk to you about this forever. You inspired souls, living beings, you've made it through to the end of another really incredible episode. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. It is such an honor to be your brother walking this path by your side. You've obviously enjoyed this video, so please do give it a thumbs up. It votes for content like this, spirituality, evolution, inspiration, to be spread around the internet further. So thank you so much in advance for doing so. And on the topic of thank yous, thank you all of you that have subscribed to this podcast. It is not possible without you guys. It's a total co-creation. So thank you so much to each and every single one of you that are subscribed to this podcast. And at the time of this recording, that's actually only 20% of you that are regularly watching this channel. 80% of you, we can see from the back end of the analytics, is actually unfortunately not yet subscribed. So many of you actually think you are subscribed, but you aren't actually subscribed. So please do take a moment. It really helps. So as I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon, join the community, join the movement, spreading love, positivity, and wisdom like this around the planet together. Thank you so much in advance for your support. And as I mentioned, the community, let's go there. Inspired Evolution community, guests like this come on once a month where I step out of the way and you get to ask your questions directly of the guests of these incredible masters that come on and shine their light and wisdom into us on this podcast. And once a week, live and interactive, I'm running guided meditations. We have community offerings, community sharings, and circles happening once a week as well. Breathwork, tarot, all sorts of cool stuff going on inside the circle. Astrology readings. It's a really, really buzzing, happening, fun place. So welcome yourself. Come on in. If you're looking for community, if you're feeling the call, if you're feeling a little bit alone, you don't need to. Please come on to the inside. We'd love to welcome you into the Inspired Evolution Circle. That's inspiredevolution.com/circle. There's a link in the description below. And now on screen to keep your inspirations flowing onwards, upwards, and inwards, the next best episode here at the Inspired Evolution for you to continue your Inspired Evolution journey. So go on, take your pick and make your click. I'll see you in the next one. I'll see you there.